Welcome to Study Session 2, Demand for Education. Introduction. The last study session was on the definition of economics of education, and you also learned a brief history of economics of education. In this study session, you will be introduced to one of the important concepts in economics of education, and that is the concept of demand for education. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you shall be able to explain the following concepts of demand: demand, price, time, demand for education. Explain both the consumption and investment views of educational demand. Define educational demand schedule. Draw the education demand curve. Analyze the law of educational demand. Explain the factors that influence demand for education. Explain the concept of elasticity of educational demand. Basic concepts of demand. Many at times as human beings, we have wants, we also have needs. We are, however, unable to attend to all our desires due to the scarcity of resources. Thereby, we resort to making choices between alternative wants. Making choices leads us to demand goods and services which we desire and willing to pay for. Let's see how the concept of demand applies in education. Demand. This is the quantity of a commodity, goods and services that consumers are willing, able and ready to buy at a given period of time and at a particular given price. Dear students, you need to understand that there is what is called effective demand, and demand is said to be effective when the desire of the consumer is backed up by his or her ability to pay, purchasing power, money. In other words, there must be a willingness on the part of the consumer to buy together with his or her ability to pay. For example, for a man to demand a wife requires that such man must be willing to have a wife. The willingness to have a wife is necessary, but not enough condition for a man to get married, and the willing man must be ready. Furthermore, willingness and readiness are not enough conditions. The man must be able to shoulder marriage responsibilities. It should be noted that a man without a job, employment, will not very likely be ready to get married because of lack of resources, money, and so on to sustain such a family. Price. This is the cost of value or worth of a given good. The cost is monetary, and that is the reason why you will ask your fellow lady, how much did you buy your Mary Kay powder? The answer will be, it was bought at 1,200 naira. Also, a man will ask his fellow colleague how much it bought his home theater. The answer will be, it was bought at 55,500 naira. In the process of you getting educated in the university or your child or children in their respective schools, you pay a price for this in terms of the school fees and other fees. Time. This is the exact point in time at which the consumer requests for the given good or service. Invariably, the academic session during which you started your course at the Distance Learning Center, University of Ibadan, is the time I am discussing here. Remember that for each of our human activities that we undertake under the earth, there is time. If demand represents the functional relationship between price and quantity, how then do we describe the demand for education? This question will be answered in our next discussion. Demand for education. This is the quality of educational services that a consumer is willing, ready, and able to ask for from the producer or supplier, school, primary, secondary, tertiary institutions, at a given price and at a given time, period. For example, if a parent wants to demand for educational service from either the Nigerian public or private university, this will be done at a given price, school fees, charged by the public or private university, and also at a particular time, which can be 2013-2014 academic year, or during the 2014-2015 academic year, as the case may be. Parent or guardian of such student must be willing, ready, and able to pay the prescribed school fees and other fees at a particular time. Demand for education from the consumption point of view. The demand for education can be viewed from consumption angle, but you need to be familiar with what consumption is. Ordinarily, it means to eat, spend, burn up something. In essence, there is an education that can be eaten up, burnt up, which will not bring any returns. If we view such education properly, it is considered or seen as a consumer durable, which has consumption benefits, such as additional social and intellectual amenities that are derivable from education. Education also brings about current consumption benefits, such as social, intellectual, and athletic activities for student consumption. As a rule, the higher the consumer price index, the higher the enrollment demands. Any form of an increase in consumer goods price raises the value of the current consumption benefit from enrollment, but may not increase the net present value of the benefits to education. In other words, when you consider what you will spend to enjoy some similar amenities outside, you may decide to enroll as a student. For example, life may be cheaper as a student than as a worker when consumer goods are very expensive. In addition, it may be cheaper to feed on a campus, as done in Nigerian universities many decades ago before the Buhari Idiagbo military administration cancelled the program in 1983, than in one's personal house or even in eateries such as Mr. Biggs, Tantalizers, ShopRite or hotels. Additionally, it may be cheaper to be accommodated in hostels than in privately rented buildings, and it may still be cheaper to wear uniforms than to wear personal dresses. Demand for education from the investment point of view. Demand for education can be viewed from investment angle if the consumer's decision to get enrolled in an educational institution is a function of the net benefit of such education. In this situation, someone may pursue university education with the view that the present value of the expected stream of benefits, monetary and non-monetary, resulting from such education exceeds the present cost of sacrifice, monetary and non-monetary, of the university education. For instance, when you wanted to decide whether or not to enroll as a distant learning student, your decision to enroll will be considered as an investment in such person. In such decision was made in the light of the expected monetary and non-monetary benefits and costs involved in enrollment on the distance learning program. Educational demand schedule. Do you know that you can place the prices of a product side by side with the amount of the product that people are willing to buy? The table you will come up with is known as demand schedule. Simply put, a demand schedule is a table that shows both the price at which a product is demanded and the quantity of such products that is demanded. To this end, educational demand schedule is a table that shows the various school prices, school fees charged by the schools, and the number of students that are enrolled in the various schools based on the different schooling prices charged. The table below shows the various schooling prices and the various enrollments of students in line with the different school prices. Table 2. The schedule above reveals that when the price of education school fees was 60,000 naira per student, 100 students were enrolled. When the school fees reduced to 50,000 naira per student, the student enrollment increased to 200. You need to observe that as the school fee reduces, the number of students that enrolled increased. This is how we as human beings behave in response to the price increase and decrease. So whenever there is an increase in school fees, people will react by reducing the number of children that will be enrolled in a given school. What parents do is to seek for alternative schools, that their school fees is really affordable. Educational demand curve. From the educational demand curve above, you can see that the curve slopes downwards from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, depicting that when the school fees was low, for example, to £5,000, consumers enrolled more of their children, for example. But as the school fee was increasing, the number of students enrolled was reducing, as you can see that when the school fee increased to 60,000, the student enrollment was 100. Our next focus is on law of educational demand. Law of educational demand. The law of educational demand expresses a relationship between the school fee charged and the number of students enrolled in the schools. The school fees is one of the factors that influence enrollment in schools. Economics of education have long deduced that the higher the school fee charged, the lower will be the enrollment. On the other hand, the lower the school fee charged, the higher will be the student enrollment. One of the fathers of economics, in the person of Alfred Marshall, puts the law of demand follows that amount of products demanded increases with a fall in price and diminishes with the rise in price. You as students need to observe carefully that this principle or law is applicable to the already stated law of educational demand above. The inverse relationship between the price of a commodity, school fee, and quantity demanded, student enrollment, is referred to as the law of educational demand. The inverse relationship between the price of the commodity, school fee, and the quantity demanded, student enrollment, is referred to as the law of demand, or better put, law of educational demand. The inverse relationship is due to two effects, which are substitution effect. Whenever the price of a commodity falls, such commodity becomes cheaper in relation to other goods. At this point, a consumer will be able to buy more of the goods and thereby satisfy his needs at minimal cost. This, if applied to education, shows that if the school fees charged by a school is not high, many parents will be able to send many of their children to the school, thereby purchasing large quantities of the available educational services at minimal cost. Income effect. The income effect comes about when there is a fall in the price of a commodity and consumers' income remains constant or unchanged, such that more goods and services can be bought with the unchanged income. For example, if a school earmarks the sum of 50,000 naira yearly for the purchase of books and other laboratory equipment, and as a result of a decrease in the price of these items, the school may purchase more quantities. The subsequent increase in the ability of the school to purchase more equipment implies an increase in real income, and this is the income effect. Do you ever consider if there is or are limitations to the law of educational demand as described above? This is discussed below. Limitations of the law of education demand. As earlier mentioned, the higher the price school fees, the lower the quantity of goods enrollment demanded, and the lower the price school fees, the higher the quantity of goods enrollment demanded. However, this law is only valid under normal circumstances, as there are exceptional cases where the law is not valid. The exceptional cases include war. If a shortage is envisaged, feared, in anticipation of war, people may start buying for building stocks, for hoarding, even when the price rises. This is applicable to education in that, when there is war, many schools will be destroyed, thereby leaving few schools left to render educational services to the public not affected by the war. The school fees that these few schools will charge will be unnecessarily high, and parents will have no option than to pay the high school fees that is charged, especially during war period. Ostentation. This can otherwise be called flamboyance or lavishness. whereby the potential school entrants demand for the educational service, even when the fee of such educational service is on the high side. For example, the school fee charged by some private schools, nursery, primary, secondary, university, is high, but you find that some parents that are rich will still enroll their children in such schools, while the parents that are not rich will enroll their children in such school, rather enroll their children in the public schools, whose fees are relatively affordable, or they are not charging school fees at all. Through the provision of free education, the demand for such schools with high school fees may not decrease as the tuition fees increase. This is because it is the desire of such parents to be exclusive, elitist, and so dissociate themselves from common people and therefore exhibit the snobbish effect. 3. Speculation. The law of demand does not apply to demand in a campaign between groups of speculators. In fact, speculation about increase or decrease in the price of education may cause a breakdown in the law of demand. For example, if consumers feel that the price of an educational service will rise in future, such consumers will prefer to enroll on such program now, rather than when the school fee will be on the high side. If, however, many potential entrants behave in such a way, a rise in the price of education may lead to an increase in the number of people that will enroll in schools as a result of the fact that others are doing so. Babalala 2003 established that speculations may create a bandwagon effect, whereby because others are doing one thing, so many others too will copy and also do the same. Inferior educational services. These are likely to attract fewer consumers if there is an increase in real income of the consumers. This is as a result of the thinking that prices are indicators of quality of items. For example, if two private schools are charging 6,000 naira and 8,500 naira per pupil per term, parents are likely to favor the more expensive school with the belief that the prices are indicators of quality and thereby demand less of the 6,000 naira school. However, what is inferior to a high-income earner may not be inferior to a low-income earner. Inferior education is usually patronized by the poor people because they cannot afford the superior education. But if there is a rise in the incomes of the poor people, they will shift from the inferior to the superior education system. Let us now examine the factors influencing demand for education. Factors influencing demand for education. Price of the education. Price is one of those factors that cause changes in demand and enrollment for education. Price of education includes tuition fee, cost of books, stationeries, feeding, transport, and so on. If the fees are fully paid for by prospective parents, cost of education will be high because the fees were not subsidized, so the quantity demanded of such education will be lower. But if the fees were subsidized, the price of education will be lower and demand will increase. In most cases, if the government of a nation wants to increase, if the price of a given education changes, there is every likelihood that the demand for such an education will change. If the price of an education, say a private primary school falls, the demand for it will increase because of the fact that people will be attracted to obtain the education service. Derivable benefits from education. There are huge benefits derivable from acquisition of education. These benefits are either pecuniary or non-pecuniary in nature. Pecuniary benefits can otherwise be called monetary, which can be in the form of earning salary and wages. Non-pecuniary is otherwise called non-monetary benefits, which can be in the form of being able to fill tax form, venturing into other businesses outside a normal salaried job. Income of the consumers. The income per head received by consumers of educational services in their places of work is a big determinant of demand for educational services. Consumers have lots of items, responsibilities that grapple with their salaries, out of which payment for educational services is one. Necessary calculations have been done, are individuals with respect to how to expend the salary. If the cost of acquisition of education will be on the high side, some reordering of responsibilities will be done by such individuals. If on the other side, the government provides free education for the citizenry, this will alleviate the problem of educational funding of parents from their meager salary to a large extent. Availability of non-education alternatives. The provision of education services to consumers have their alternatives, which is the engagement in family businesses, learning of a trade, traveling out of the country, and so on. Once there are alternatives to getting educated, some parents might opt for these alternatives, which however will be paid for later in life. It is important to ensure that getting educated is given high priority at all times. Our next and last discussion will be on the degree of responsiveness of educational demand to a little change in some variables such as price, income, and related prices. Concept of elasticity of educational demand. As a student, you will have seen elastic at one time or the other, probably with your fashion designer. If you have also used rubber band, it falls into this category, which is elastic in nature. This section has to do with elasticity of educational demand. Please remember that you cannot expand the elastic that you lay your hand on to any extent, and likewise the rubber band that is on you. Further, remember whenever you transact business in the bank and you are given large sums of money, you ask the bank teller to give you rubber band to hold firmly your money. Elasticity has to do with how one can stretch, extend, elongate, make longer, and the elastic that is on you. If we, however, apply what we have been examining to our discussion, that is demand for education, the consumers can allow large number of their children to attend schools or decide to reduce the number of their children that will attend school due to changes in price. This decision of allowing large or small number of children to attend school or get enrolled in school based on the fees that are charged is called elasticity of educational demand. If we attempt to define elasticity of educational demand, we can say that it is the responsiveness of change in student enrollment demand in schools with respect to changes in prices or school fees. The formula for elasticity of educational demand is given as: demand for education can be inelastic, unitary, of elastic. But on a general note, Babalola 2003 confirmed that demand for education is generally inelastic when it is compared to its price. It implies that the educational demand usually drops by much less than 1%, while the price of education, school fees, rises by 1%. The relationship between change in enrollment demand and change in price of education can be expressed as shown below. LOG equals 1, where elasticity of demand, and it is expressed as follows: less than 1 showing an inelastic demand for educational service, O 1 showing exactly a unitary demand for educational service, G greater than 1 showing an elastic demand for educational services, that is, E greater than 1. Example: by increasing the level of fees from 200 to 600 naira, the total private cost of education charged changed from 2,000 naira to 2,400 naira. Enrollment also changed negatively from 30,000 to 25,000. In order to calculate the elasticity of demand with respect to private cost of education, we need the percentage differences in both demand and cost. Note that 0.83 is less than 1, and it shows that the private cost elasticity of enrollment demand is inelastic. Enrollment demand dropped by 60.67%, while the private cost of education rose by 20% during the same period.